really excited about the program today. We introduced in a little bit, but he and I have known each other since college days, and watched his history from a distance, and just really thankful to the Lord for all that God has used him for. So, but the first thing we're going to do is scripture and prayer, and Bob Matthews from the state of Colorado. Us in scripture and prayer. So, Bob, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Bob. I'm reading this morning from Galatians, verses 7 through 10. And the word says, "Be not deceived, God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. The one who sows to please his sinful nature, from that nature will reap destruction. The one who sows to please the Spirit, from the Spirit will reap eternal life. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong to the family of believers." Let's pray. Heavenly Father, again, we come giving you praise and glory for who you are, thanking you for Jesus, our Savior, the Holy Spirit, and your word. We thank you, dear Father, that you are always with us. We thank you, dear Father, we have the promise that we will reap if we do not give up. And in these times, dear Father, strengthen our hearts. We know the opportunities are so great, and we humbly pray, dear God, that we will see that by the guidance of your Spirit. Bless our speaker today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Well, I just want to again welcome you here and remind you that next Monday our speaker will be Taylor Fields, who is pastor of the Graffiti Church in New York City. So we're excited about him coming as well, but especially excited about our speaker today. And I'm going to recognize Chelsea, who is on our church strengthening team and community ministry. She's going to introduce our speaker and also tell you about some other things. So Chelsea, I'll turn it to you.
Great, thank you. Well, first off, DBA helps sponsor a conference called the No Need Among You Conference, and it is going to be held on October 15th. It is looking like it might be a hybrid model as far as I understand this year, but it moves around from different cities. We've been blessed to have it in Dallas a couple of years ago for the first time. It's been hosted in Waco and Houston and other areas, and this year it will be brought back up to the DFW area and will be hosted in Fort Worth. So we want to make sure that you're aware of this opportunity. It's a great place to network and hear from some great practitioners of Christian community development principles. We'll be sending out some information on that as the date approaches a little bit closer, but you can go to txccdn.net and get more information about that conference and go ahead and register for it. So that's available. We'll put that link in the chat box and then also email it out to you as well. And today we're very blessed to have Brother Jimmy Dorrell with us. He is actually the President Emeritus of the Texas Christian Community Development Network, the one that hosts this conference. So we're excited to have him today. He's also the co-founder and President Emeritus of Mission Waco, Mission World, and is the pastor of Church Under the Bridge, and also teaches classes at Baylor University and Truett Seminary as well in Waco. After he received his degree, he and his wife Janet traveled around the world working among the poor, and then eventually moved into the North Waco neighborhood, where I believe they've been in the same house over 40 years, I think, if I'm correct on that. Correct me if I'm wrong, Brother Jimmy. Where they are doing incarnational ministry in the neighborhood that they live in. Jimmy has also written several books, including one that's now available for pre-sale. He has graciously shared a code with us, so you can actually get 20% off and free shipping. I don't know if do we have that slide, James, that we can put up there? If not, we will send that in the chat box as well and then email that out to you. So he's been gracious to provide that promo code for us. So you'll want to be sure and take advantage of it. The title is Commonwealth Transformation Through Christian Community Development. Jimmy has been married to Janet, and they have 9 grandchildren, which is great. So amongst all their ministry, I'm sure you enjoy spending lots of time with them as well. Today, we are so excited to hear from you, Brother Jimmy. You've been an inspiration to so many people in Christian community development, including myself, as I was a junior high student, actually, in our mission group. Yes, you came up and visited Mission Waco, and so that was the first time I heard of Brother Jimmy, and since then it has truly been an inspiration to watch the many, many ways that God has used you to impact so many lives. So we greatly appreciate you taking the time out to come and share with us today.
Thank you, Chelsea.
All right, Jimmy, you're on.
We're up. All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for the time. I really appreciate this. Bob Dean and I go way back, and whether you enjoy the presentation or not, I'm just glad to visit with him. Let me kind of do one quick update. You heard Chelsea say about the conference. Because of the virus, we were at the National CCDA conference, which was kind of a mothership of what I got to be involved with this ministry about. Christian Community Development Association was in Kansas City, and they canceled and went totally to virtual. And so we decided we've been weighing this thing very seriously, and finally had our membership vote, and we decided on a virtual and a present. So instead of having 2.5 days, which we normally do, we'd be over at Fort Worth this year. We're going to do a 1-day present one where only 200 people can come, and then we're going to do the rest of it virtual. And we have 4 plenary speakers that will package their deal, and it'll be available on video for the same amount. So $75 for either route you go, but that will also widen out the possibility of people who normally don't come to a conference, or certainly those that are afraid because of the virus. We just don't know how to handle it. But it's been a real challenging time to figure that out, and we're now ready to go to this 1-day method. We'll be in Houston next year, and already have, if you know the book When Helping Hurts, I'll mention it in a minute, but we will have Bob Fickert speaking, as well as some other great speakers as well. So we each year do a different conference, as Chelsea said, in a different city, and have usually 60 workshops or more dealing with issues in the city that many of you deal with as well. So, okay. So can everybody see? I'm making sure we're okay when I go here. I'm going to do just a very brief front load on principles and a couple of things on the theology of community development. Like most of you that are my age, Bob's my age, I grew up in the church that was very much evangelical all the time. I grew up in First Baptist Church of Conroe, Texas. I have a 7-year Sunday school attendance pin, so you know I'm a legitimate Pharisee. And I rarely missed. I love church, and came to, by the way, Conroe was a little town back then. That was before they built a lake, and then came to Baylor. And but I used to watch the Christian Life Commission stuff. I was always fascinated by the kind of things that Foy Valentine and those guys were doing, and I thought that's really what I'd love to do. Well, as it turns out, went on to work at Highland Baptist for lots of years. Went to seminary. Oh, by the way, when I came to Waco, I was, like many of us, pretty racist. I wouldn't call it that out loud now to people back then, but I was one of those guys that grew up where my city was divided. The blacks were on one side, the whites another. 2 water fountains, 2 little leagues, 2 movie theaters. Nobody did anything together. And so when I came to Waco, I kept struggling with that. I remember when our church wouldn't let the blacks come in one Sunday back in 1967. So I always asked the question, why didn't we talk about those things? Why wasn't it a part of our ability? But we just kind of wished it would go away, but it didn't. And King was marching. And so when I came to Waco and got hired by Highland Baptist while I went to Baylor to work in the city, we had a lot more poor people in Waco. We have about a 28.7% poverty rate compared to most cities that have about 13.3%. And so as I'd work with these kids, I'd run into several, and they were beginning to integrate. And had a call from a pastor named Dewey Pinckney. He was a pastor of a church called St. Mary's Baptist Church. I didn't know you could have a St. Mary's Baptist Church. And Pinckney was the head of the NAACP. And he invited me over to a little part of town called No Man's Land, which neither Belmead, the adjoining city, or Waco would take because the poverty was so overwhelming, less than 2 miles from Baylor. And it was my first privilege and fear to go over there and begin to work with these low-income children as a youth director, bringing our kids over to do vacation Bible schools. And of course, experientially, you get changed more when you get hands-on instead of what you just sitting back and talk about. And so God broke my heart, changed my views. I saw poverty. I smelled poverty. I walked into a house one day we thought nobody lived in, and a blind man living among rats and roaches, overwhelming smell, a scream when we came in the door. And so those were the early days. And then as we went back and forth, got to be more involved with the poor, mostly African-Americans there. And then after Highland Baptist, before I went to seminary, I went to work for the Waco State Home here in Waco. These were about 250, 300 kids that were taken away from their parents because of child abuse and neglect. They were kids from 6 years old to 17 years old, 18 years old, and got cussed out the first day by a 6-year-old, and it went downhill from there. It was the hardest job I ever had. Friday night, I went out to Cameron Park to have a little talk with God to remind him how important I was, and that I had a 7-year Sunday school attendance pin and been youth directing all those years, and he didn't seem too impressed. And it became my put up or shut up night. And I became convicted that I knew all the Bible verses, we should love other people that were different. But I went back on the next Monday morning, and it began a journey for me. 3 years of working with very tough kids. I was a recreation supervisor, so lots of encounters with them. And I fell in love with them over time. And those two experiences together began to reshape how I saw ministry. Went on to Southwestern. Bob and I were the same time there. And but my job, the Methodist Church would hire 5 of us seminary Baptist boys. And so I lived on the top floor of Epworth Hall, downtown Fort Worth. And my afternoon job was working at the housing projects called Ripley Arnold, just down the street. So again, 3 jobs. Now I'm living my experience out of being around the poor. And I got a little bit frustrated. Those were the years that I was kind of wondering what's going on with the church. And so this struggle between what I was seeing in the afternoon with kids and families versus what I was being taught in the mornings, and thought, how does this fit together? So left, and then Janet and I went to Houston to work with Ralph Neighbor. We were doing cell groups, went to Korea and studied the cell group movement for a period of time, then came back and implemented cell groups there in Houston. Loved it, but it was on the west side of town where mostly folks were rich. And Janet we just kind of confirmed the fact that it was really our calling was to the poor. So we decided it was time to see the world. We were asking God if we should be long-term missionaries, and we sold our house, had a 1-year-old, and stuck him on our back and took off. And for the next 4.5 months, went around the world, worked among the poor, smuggled Bibles into the Eastern Bloc. We got to meet Mother Teresa. We just had this incredible experience. It's hard, but it was also very life-changing. When we came back to the States, we decided to come back to Waco because we had connections here, but we felt like we couldn't go back to middle-class America. We'd been too overwhelmed by the thousands of kids dying daily and the need and the people who didn't know Christ. And so we felt like incarnation was what we were to be doing. And one of the principles of Christian community development is incarnational, that not being as close or engaged with the people. And so I had a job. I'd gotten a job as a grant writer and program director for a social service agency for about 8 years before Mission Waco started. But we moved in and do an old house. I live in a 4,000 square foot house that we bought for $12,000. It was in terrible shape. Slumlords had put it back to, they take these old houses and cram poor people in them. So we had 2 mentally ill guys on one side when we bought the house, a kid upstairs had rats and roaches all over it. And the other side, we had a lady called Cat Lady that had 40 cats in a 1-bedroom apartment. And we were so excited, but my father-in-law did not share that excitement at all. I can't believe that. But we a bar across the street called the Chat and Chew, crack dealers on the corner, prostitutes on the street. And we had young children. So we did what we wanted to do. We built a basketball court. So I had an extra half lot out there, and we built a half court, and then later on finished it out to a full court. So literally for 40 years, kids have been playing basketball. I had to run them off last night again. They don't want to go home at night. So we saw our children get to know the children in the neighborhood. My wife got to know their mamas. And what was very organic in the beginning became Mission Waco. As Janet would meet with the moms, they'd say, hey, my husband needs a job. And so we would start a job training program. And the next question would be, my uncle's on crack. And so we would create a alcohol and drug rehab. So everything we've done at Mission Waco through the years came up naturally from relationships of incarnation, because we were listening to the people. One of the main goals of CCD is just to be able to listen and to partner with. In fact, one of the principles as well is the people with the problem must be a part of the solution to the problem. Unfortunately, we created this I'll tell you what to do and you go do it mindset, but the poor, for lots of reasons I don't have to go into, because of the dependency that many of them created on the government or other ways, took away a lot of their dignity. Dignity is a big part of this. So if you don't know about what's called ABCD, asset-based community development, it's a model that really starts not with the question, what's wrong with your neighborhood, but what's right with your neighborhood. What are the gifts God gave you that you can do to help redo the neighborhood? Not just, we need somebody to come in and fix this. So with these incarnational and principles and dignity, and we got to know CCDA, this national group. John Perkins is my hero. If you know John, he's been around a long time. He's 83 or 4 now, I think. And John, arrested by the Klan, beaten and all that during the civil rights movement. But God just did an incredible work in his life. He became a Christian. He didn't go to church until late in his adulthood, young adulthood, I guess. But he and some other guys created Christian community development as a model to how do you help empower people, not give them stuff, not just tell them stuff, but how do you take those 15-year-old kids and give them job skills? How do you begin to? So we went up to their conference in Denver that first year and continued to be involved for the next 20 years. I got on the national board with them. People are doing incredible stuff across our nation. Mary Nelson in North Chicago, Bob Lupton over in Atlanta, people all over the nation. I found this joy and this hope and this excitement. I mean, we were all struggling. Our kids were going to urban schools down the street that were not as good as the suburban schools, and we had different issues that we would face that the traditional church would not face. But there was this sincere joy of being called to the city. So through the years, we learned from each other. And so we learned about our toy store. Most of you do toy stores now, or some of you do, where back then we just gave toys to poor people. But we never asked ourselves, what is it like to show up as a white Sunday school class in a black neighborhood with housing projects, knock on the door and give them toys? How does the father feel when, certainly there's some appreciation, but usually the father walks out the back door because he can't provide for his own kids, and the mother receives the gifts and is not. But we thought, how can that be changed? Well, in Atlanta, Bob Lupton was doing some incredible stuff by, they bring these toys together. So we do in Waco a huge toy run with bikers and with 20 different churches. And then we sell the toys to the poor for an 80% discount. So that $10 toy is now a $2 toy. And the dignity of getting to buy for your own kids to put under your own tree completely changed the model of how helping happens. So over time, people began to write. And by the way, we noticed that Texas wasn't there. I say this sadly, but when we go to these national conferences around the nation, Texas folks didn't show up. You know this if you took seminary, but let me remind you of an era of our history that was really challenging. From 1900 to 1930, there was a period of time called the Great Reversal. It was the beginning of the fundamentalist moderate fight. where those that were more liberal began to do social action. Walter Rauschenbusch in New York City at Hell's Kitchen, and people doing things. But it was also the same period of time where the God is Dead movement. And so as the more liberal church got more associated with action, reform kind of things, social action, and in the era of not having this zeal to follow Christ, but maybe see him as an example, the more evangelical church, the conservative church, we did what's natural. We pulled away from that. We didn't want to be considered, liberal in any kind of way. Well, what happened over time is this division got so entrenched that the evangelical church just did evangelism, and the liberal church mostly just did social action. And this division was never intended. It's not biblical. It's not what I'm sure God wanted, because helping needs were always there. And historically in the church, as well as now, this holistic mindset, and we use that word carefully because it gets misconstrued a lot, but holism is this sense that God cares about the whole person. This Greek theology that I just have some kind of zipper lining soul that gets saved and that's all that matters is not biblical, and we know that. So because God cares about the whole person, we'd kind of lost, with exception of the Christian Life Commission and a few pieces of the Baptist world, there wasn't a whole lot of that. So every time I went to church in my life, there was an invitation, even on Wednesday night. And so we just kept getting saved. And I say that kind of humorously because we bring in the revival speaker, and he'd say something like, if we didn't know the day and time we became a Christian, maybe we're not a Christian. So we'd walk the aisle again, and we go to camp. And, that's what we did. We did it well. We do evangelism. Now, sadly, that's not as true today as it was. But on the other side, though, we rarely heard anything about Christian social ministries. So as I began to understand more through the CCA, and because Texans weren't coming, we created this Texas network. And that's been going now for 10 years. But practically, Mission Waco grew up in our neighborhood. So around these women that my wife was meeting with, the children on the court, the guy who needed the job, we created the nonprofit called Mission Waco, and eventually called it Mission Waco, Mission World, because we also work in Haiti, in Mexico City, and in India, and have been now for 30 years. So it's kind of a blend. And really, quite honestly, community development works across all these spheres. It's not an American or an international thing. What we do in Haiti with microloans with women, water wells, 350 kids that we have that are in schools in Haiti, what we do with healthcare among the Muslim tribal group we work with in India, or what we do in Mexico City with the homeless, all the same model, just different context. And certainly it's got to be tweaked at some level. But as we began to do Mission Waco and it began to grow, people began to come and ask, could we help them understand the model that we worked from? And so slowly, we grew. Today we have 75 staff members at Mission Waco, and there's about 16 major ministries, from homeless shelter to job training to alcohol and drug rehab and all those. One of my favorite ones that might be a good chance. Who's doing the extra, pulling up this, Chelsea, or who's going to pull up the slides? Does somebody have that? I'm not sure if it got done.
I have it. Which one do you want?
Look, pull the grocery store up. Let's look at that. Can you do that? There's a video as well. I gave you a link for a video. Do you have that?
Yes. You want the video or the?
Show the picture first, and then let's look at the video, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
And you'll like this because it's got to do with the Dallas. No, not that one. That's the the book. There is a link to a Jubilee Food Market.
Yeah.
You know, keep looking and I'll talk.
I got it right here.
Okay.
That's the one.
Yes, hit the start that. This is out of WFAA in Dallas.
Wednesday's Child has such an amazing
Oops.
No, that's right. That's the leader on the you got to get rid of the
the ad. Okay.
The ad. You can punch it as soon as it comes on.
on finding happy homes for children in foster care.
You can help.
Become a Dallas Casa volunteer to ensure a future for our most precious children.
Wednesday's Child is brought to you by Dallas Casa, Crest Cadillac, and WFAA.
Of us have plenty of grocery stores to choose from, but if you go to one zip code in Dallas, there's only one big name store. I'll say it again. There's only one major grocery store in all of 75216 that covers Cedar Crest, South Dallas, and several other neighborhoods. And keep in mind, if you don't have a car, it may be hard to get there. The average life expectancy in this zip code is just 70 years old, one of the lowest in Dallas County. Now compare that to folks who live in 75204. It has the highest life expectancy in Dallas County, 90 years old. That zip includes Uptown and part of Old East Dallas. It's a much smaller area, but folks who live there can choose from 4 big-name stores. So this month, we're partnering with the American Heart Association. They want to fix these food deserts, and Kevin Reese shows us why they went to Waco for inspiration.
One of Waco's oldest neighborhoods is a place called Brook Oaks, and to say that it's a bit rough around the edges,
Martha Jane Liquor Store was here for years.
Is just part of the understatement that Bobby Robinson will give you.
Night people walking the street. Prostitution was up and down through here.
Crime and poverty.
The drug dealers, the prostitutes.
And more stuff Sammy Smith and his neighbors simply didn't want.
At its worst, of course, the porn theater on the corner over there.
Yes, they did have a porn theater. What they didn't have was a grocery store.
A food desert. Really, we had a food desert.
A food desert, a poor neighborhood with 0 healthy food options within several miles walking distance. Only convenience stores and liquor stores and the bad life choices they can bring. Desert very much in need of an oasis.
Okay, let me tell you the story on this. We had to redo it all, but at least it was there.
Jimmy Dorrell is the man with that oasis in mind.
What happens with the neighborhoods like this is they don't have any options, so they all were frustrated and kept saying, help us figure out a way to do this in our community.
What he and the group Mission Waco did 2.5 years ago now.
Clean and pretty was a big deal to us.
Is convert 6,500 square feet of a former convenience store into the Jubilee Food Market, a nonprofit grocery store with affordable and healthy food right in the middle of a neighborhood that needed it most.
In our mind, this will be a life changer health-wise, as much as it will be dignity for those people who live in the neighborhood.
And that's exactly
Jubilee has done a great thing.
what happened.
It just changed the whole neighborhood.
That old adult theater around the corner is a family community theater now. The liquor store is gone. A restaurant and cafe and other new stores thrive across the street, and more are on the way.
Oxtail.
And the American Heart Association of North Texas is here to learn how best to bring this same success,
The additional health things that we're trying to move toward,
to South Dallas.
It's a wonderful access point for people to recognize what it is to be healthy and what it is to live healthy. This is just beginning to tell the story of, how do we make a difference in a community?
This is my twin brother. We've been friends 33 years.
Okay, what is it?
And as South Dallas considers this same thing, the people of Jubilee Market would tell them it doesn't just improve how a neighborhood looks, it doesn't just improve the health of people by improving what they eat. It can also improve how people feel about where they live, and that can be pretty strong medicine too. That's what grocery store employee David Daniels told me. He was mostly homeless until Jubilee gave him and his neighborhood a fresh, healthy start.
Even though we from a family from a different color or a different kind, it's a big family right here. 15 block radius, we all just kind of blend in together.
They felt loved, they felt dignity, they felt like we now are in control of our own eating patterns. Definitely a success from the beginning.
Okay, that's perfect right there.
Whew, okay.
Once they started developing this, it changed the whole neighborhood. It made you feel a lot better to, be a part of something, to see things change.
A successful change because they worked with people in this neighborhood, gave them what they wanted, gave them what they so desperately needed. This oasis.
Hope it's here forever and a day.
With an impact they hope lasts just as long too.
The dozen eggs for 99 cents, you can't beat that nowhere in Waco, Texas.
In Waco, I'm Kevin Reese.
We'll stop there, but I'll just show them. I'll just stop there, and I'll come back and ask you to show one more thing in just a minute. Am I back on audio for everybody? So I never planned on starting a grocery store. I had no idea what I was doing. But over the years, I've lived 43 years in this neighborhood. My kids have grown up here. The children that we work with are now 35 years old. One of them was a poor kid. They did a story yesterday in the Tribune Herald that lived down the street that was a poor African-American kid that came over to our children's program, then our teen program, and talented, and we got him involved in where the old Porno Theater, now Jubilee Theater, where we began to do plays in the neighborhood and get people to come in. He was so talented. We helped him go to college at North Texas. And then he eventually called and said, can you help me get my Master's of Fine Arts? And I said, no, I can't do that, but I'll hire you to be our first theater director. Well, Stevie Walker Webb came back to our theater, and the most incredible 3 years where he was the director. I mean, the kid was 24 years old. And plays, we did Fences that was on Broadway with neighborhood people, all kinds of different things that we did to empower people to have this dignity and do plays that we could have discussions about at the end. And Stevie called me the next year, and he said, I just got my dream. He said, the best drama school in the nation has offered me a scholarship. There's 1,200 people applied for 3 scholarships, and I got one of those. So here's this poor neighborhood kid, just a nobody kid as far as the world's concerned, that went to New York City. He finished his Master's of Fine Arts 3 years ago, and for the last 2.5 years has been a director on plays. He's off Broadway, right next to Broadway. They'll probably be on Broadway next year. He's already won a couple of awards as a director. Amazing story, a neighborhood kid. We've got to learn to see those children in the neighborhoods as that's the gifts God gave them. But unfortunately, a lot of times we're just trying to patch up their problems. Well, they're not all Stevie Walker Webb. Some of them don't make it. Some of them go to prison. We do have challenges, but we still hang in there over time. And that's been one of the blessings, is to hang around and be connected to the neighborhood. But whatever we do, we ask them what they think. So for the Jubilee Food Market, for years they kept saying, we have to walk 2.5 miles to HEB across town because we don't have a car and there's no way to get there by bus within 2 hours. And we're walking 2.5 miles, or we buy food at this convenience store, which is jacking up the price of bread, doubling the prices of what little they had. But most of it was lottery ticket stuff. It was lottery tickets in the one-liner machines. And they were wasting their money. They were getting obese because of the wrong foods. And they were the ones asking us over and over, please help us get a grocery store. Well, grocery stores are very thin margins of profit, 2%. And so we knew that would be tough. So we'd done the research. I contacted places up in the Northeast where a couple of them had happened. But we brought when we finally bought the building, the roof had fallen in, we patched it up and then brought the neighborhood together, and 65 neighborhood people showed up, and we had this 2.5-hour discussion and asked them, what do you want this to be? It's our building, but we're neighbors. What do you want? And they voted on 12 different options, and 77% said they wanted a grocery store. So I told them, I said, we'll do the best we can, but you do it with us, but it's going to be hard. We got to raise a lot of money. Mission Waco has to depend on, we're about a $3.5 million organization now, and I have to raise a lot of that. We also had to raise money for the store, which was going to be about $900,000. And we didn't know if we could do that or not. But by the grace of God, I was actually speaking. I teach a class called Perspectives on the World Christian Movement. Some of you know that class. I was up at Watermark, and after I'd finished teaching the class there at Watermark, 2 guys came up and said, I think we need to help you. And I said, tell me about that. And he said, well, one guy said, I just retired from Kroger's after 40 years, and I got a little bit of life left in me. And he said, my buddy here built all the Kroger's in Dallas-Fort Worth. And he said, can we come down and look at your convenience store and see if we can give you some suggestions? So they came down. Well, it turns out they ended up being 2 of the members of our dream team, and 10 guys sat around the table, and we dealt with every barrier of the grocery store. This guy named Nick, who's still very much involved in Perspectives up in McKinney, at First Baptist McKinney, he came in. We basically started, it's been 3.5 years now, the Jubilee Food Market, and it has been such a fun thing. It was described very well. But the liquor store across the street was the same way. We now have an economic center there. We have a place because you couldn't get to the retail center, so all the money goes out of a neighborhood. So in this holistic understanding of what it means to be meeting human needs in a Christian worldview, our model has been doing different kinds of things: children, youth, theater, art, all kinds of different things. And we send our teenagers get to go on trips every year. They didn't get to this year, but we'll send. I think last year sent 35 kids went to DC. I sent them up there to fix the mess, but they didn't get the job done. And then but our goal is to get them out of the neighborhood and let them see. So we help our kids. We have a scholarship program, and for college, if they go through the process, we can help them go to community college and then college. So it's very holistic. It's very wide. And out of that, just quickly, 28 years ago, the homeless were sleeping under the bridge there at I-35. And then Janet and I were having breakfast one morning at Taco Cabana and looked across the street and said, look, those, we don't understand homelessness. Why are they out there? And so we went across the street and invited them back over to Taco Cabana, and they put their stuff on the porch side out there, and we had breakfast. And I said, why are you homeless? Tell me the stories. And I listened and heard their stories and thought, if I'd grown up like them, I'd be homeless. And so most of them had mental health issues. Many of them were addicted. A lot of it was episodic as well as those issues. But they had a great morning. We had a great morning. So they said, let's do it next week. So the next Friday they brought more. And third week breakfast cost me $250. And I said, I can't do this anymore. And they said, well, why don't you come under our bridge and lead a Bible study? I thought, what a privilege. So we didn't, crash in there to do a thing, but they invited us. And then we did that first day, and they said, come back. So we came back, and third Sunday, some guy had a sign and said, instead of work for food, he said, come to Bible study. And so this little group of a handful of homeless people, chronic homeless, began to call it Church on the Bridge. And over the next few years, we separated Mission Waco from Church Under the Bridge. So today we have a church of about 300 people, blacks and whites and browns, rich people and poor people. It is but the principles of community development are there. They are part of the leadership. This is not a bunch of middle-class white folks going over to help poor black folks. This is a church where they're leaders as well. I've got a guy that stands in the front of the stage who's mentally ill. He plays like he plays the guitar. He got off the bus one year and said something, nobody understood him. It took him about 8 times, and somebody said, I think he's asking, can he be on the worship team? Well, he couldn't even talk, much less play an instrument. But we thought, Jesus would figure out what to do with Patrick. And so we eventually put him on the bongos. He knocked them off, and they went in the street, so that didn't work. And the next week we drew him a box and said, Patrick, stay in your box. And he got out of his box and knocked over music stands. But the third week we got him a guitar. We just never plugged him in. So he's played the electric guitar now for 10 years without being plugged in. And he's so happy, and we are too. And he's the front microphone. So when you come to church, you think something's different about this church. My co-pastor is African-American. Having a multicultural staff is very important. We have 2 Hispanic women on our church staff. So we are a blended staff. We share leadership. We believe that, and we're dealing with hard issues as well, because we've got so many people coming out of county jail. But now it's Baylor kids sitting next to folks that are mentally ill. Had a schizophrenic guy a few weeks ago take communion 12 times. Well, he just kept coming back around. I thought, I guess it won't hurt you. But I mean, there's stuff they don't teach in seminary. But it really is just loving people and figuring out, how to do that kind of stuff. So Church of the Bridge is separate from Mission Waco, and I still pastor the church. I retired from Mission Waco after 28 years. I brought in a guy 3 years earlier to make a good transition. It's gone great. And so John Calloway is the executive director now. And then because I couldn't go fish by the river and have my heart attack, I decided I wanted to work about 20 hours a week. So I work I'm the co-director of the Christian Community Development Network, the Texas network. So my connection with many of you, I know a lot of you, I'm in the Dallas-Fort Worth area a lot. We've had, Dallas has come down 4 different times to look at our grocery store, Oak Cliff in particular. And many of you know the there's a couple of groups that have come down to see if, because there's not a grocery store in South Oak Cliff where they would like to put one. Chris Simmons is a good friend. He's preached under the bridge. Y'all know him over in Dallas, South Dallas. And so there are some incredible people in your community that we work with. Some of you know City Square. They have a similar model. They're different in some ways, but it's the same kind of mindset. And then we have literally thousands of groups, kids, adults that come go through 2 things with us. We have a poverty simulation weekend. We started 30 years ago, and we've had 24,000 people go through that weekend. It's an intensive Friday night through Sunday afternoon. You become poor. No matter what I'm doing today, it's still called cognitive dumping. I'm not going to change your behavior by what I say, but when you come and feel poverty, and a planned famine is 3 hours, that's not going to get you there. But through this weekend, you will be poor. And we don't tell you all the details. You can go to the Mission Waco website and look at it. We do it 12 times a year now. And we have groups from all over America that come from the East Coast to the West Coast. And of course, lots of Texas, as well as we are a mission trip site where people come here to have their groups come. We have a lot of Christian schools that come from Austin, and they stay here and do 3 or 4 days. Honestly, the middle class white kid is the hardest ones to work with for me, because they bring all the presuppositions in. They think they understand. They don't understand. So because mobilizing is our second goal of ministry, first is to empower the poor, but secondly is to help the middle class Christians understand poverty. The stuff that's going on in our nation, as bad as it is in so many ways, people are listening now in ways they have not listened before. What does it mean to be an African American in poverty? What's your worldview and how you see things is not what they imagine it to be. So some of our work is just having to reshape the mindset of Christians who have good hearts, but they don't know how really to address the poor in ways that are legitimate. And then our third thing is that we do what we deal with systemic injustice. So there are some things that the Texas Network does as well, but minimum wage is never going to get our people out of poverty. And so we're advocating always for living wage jobs. There was a front page article yesterday on Stevie Walker Webb's brother, who's schizophrenic, who's been thrown in county jail numerous times because he has these episodic situations and the police don't have anywhere to take him. So they take him to county jail for months at a time. Texas is number 48 out of 50 states in terms of serving the mentally ill, and something's got to be done. So advocacy becomes part of what we do. Some of the issues we don't pick any issue. Mass incarceration to us is really out of hand, and we've got to stand up as churches. So our joy is to grab churches and create a sense of listening and discussion. And I know we're maybe way over here on one side, and we wish they were over here, but how do we help them transition into a compassionate person that knows how to serve the poor and marginalized in a way that's helpful, but also, listen to this, what we can learn from them. And so in our model, it is equal footing. I am no better. I'm just a friend. I won't let them call me Reverend. I'm just Jimmy. And I wish you could have been to Easter yesterday. Because we got our Easter got stolen because of the pandemic. We couldn't have it, but we have this place called Camp Hope that we go every year on Easter and have a big baptism and picnic and service. And so we decided to do it yesterday. We've been planning this way. So it was our Easter in July, and so we went out and we did all the COVID stuff. We followed all the rules, and probably had about 200 instead of 300, but had this beautiful service. And then we have our people give testimony before we baptize them. It was the most amazing. I baptized 8 yesterday. One guy was a violent gangster. I mean, this guy was bad news, had come to Christ. We had a man that was PTSD, had a woman that had been living in the shelter for a while, 2 grandmothers that were coming out of poverty. This 8 people that they were black, white, and brown. Such a different. And Charles and I had the privilege to baptize them there in the Middle Bosque River. So there's a sense of joy in what we get to do, and I just feel humbled by God every day I wake up to get to be a part of something so fun. And there's a lot more, but maybe it'd be best for the learning experience, whatever time we have left, to do some question and answers. Let's show the screen on the helping when helping hurts. Many of you read this book. Brian Fickert and Corbett. Is it there? This Principles of Helping. Do you have that?
What is it? One of the PDFs?
Yeah. I don't know what does it say Principles of Helping?
I got
Is that
it
on there?
Yeah, I found it. Give me one quick second. Okay.
All right, let me quickly fly through this. This is nothing new. Most of you, again, When Helping Hurts has been, there are 300,000 copies out there now. So anybody that works in a church ought to read this book, because what the presupposition is that Bryant Meyer did the work. He was the academic behind all this, but Corbett and Fickert, incredible guys, came in and said, look, we have this misunderstanding of what poverty is. It's about relationships. And this is from a Christian worldview. And so we'll just quickly fly through this. If you think that poverty is because people are uneducated, then you're going to spend your time trying to create knowledge. If you think it's because of oppression by powerful people, work for social justice. And all these are true. Are the personal sins of the poor, we're going to evangelize and disciple the poor. That's our primary platform we'll use. If we think it's a lack of material possessions, we're just going to give stuff away. And what you don't understand, a lot of our church members don't understand, that, it's not until about, in America, because churches don't know how to do this model, they'll give some, particularly right now with all this going on, but in a normal year, it may be late Thanksgiving time before they start really giving. And a lot, in Mission Waco, probably 30% of our income happens the last, from Thanksgiving to the new year. And so, but this is a day-to-day stuff. So these are models, but basically, let's look at the next one. It's relationships, because first it's a relationship with God, that whole sense of who I am, a relationship with self. So many of our folks don't have a good view of themselves. That comes out of relationships and helping them see that they're valued at the Imago Dei of God. Relationships with others, healthy relationships with each other. What does it mean to be church together? Listen and learn from each other. And of course, how to be a better steward of God's earth. And so this would be the model that they're going to talk a lot about. And then lastly, this is where it gets painful for most churches, because we live in a mostly relief-oriented world. Here's the problem. Let's give them stuff because I got too much and I feel a little guilty, so we're going to give them stuff. Well, that really doesn't change much behavior. You can give people all the money in the world, and it doesn't deal with the poverty issues if you don't do it differently from that. But when there's a crisis, and Baptists do this as well as anybody, if not better, when there's an earthquake in Haiti, you give money. When there's a pandemic, you give food. So clearly, relief has a major part of it. But in the mindset of Corbett and Fickert, we should flip the model. Instead of saying mostly for relief and a little bit left over for community development, the majority of our funding should and could go to what he would call development. So after relief, after the houses are being built in Haiti, after the people have been fed, then what? And so how do you help the people with the problem move on to own that, to be empowered, to have ownership? And I have 4 children, and one of my kids was from the neighborhood. We adopted a 3-year-old Hispanic girl from the neighborhood living in the back of a van. And when she was in the 7th grade, she came and said, "Dad, will you help me with my homework tonight? I can't figure out these formulas." Well, I couldn't figure them out either, but she sat there with me as I learned them. And then in a minute, she said, I need to go to the bathroom. So she left. Well, about 30 minutes later, I realized she had never come back. She was in there watching television, and I was deep into her homework. As it turns out, I made 100 on her homework, but she didn't still know how to do the problem. That's the way relief just fixes it temporarily, but it doesn't teach and train. Rehab is that challenging time, and it's not the same. It's not an age thing. It's a maturity thing. As you begin to give people the parts of the responsibility, and then over time in discipleship, they are able to own it. And success is at the end of the day when I'm standing at the back of the room and they're standing in the front of the room. They're the ones leading the program. That's hard for us to do because we're built-in leaders who want to control. We can run a meeting better than they can, we think. The last part about development is what our model is, and how do you help work together with it? The book Commonwealth is more about, it's not a, don't give us all your money, but how do we figure out, God has blessed some of us with financial and intellectual resources, others with hands and feet. How do we work together to change our cities? That is a group process. It's a church process. And unfortunately, churches haven't been trained this way, so we're way far behind. Other places do these things better than we do. And so I think I'll just end there. There's, let me say this one piece I think is important. The Black church understands empowerment much better than we do. Because after the civil rights movement, when the blacks began to move north, where thinking the poverty wouldn't be, there'd be opportunity for jobs, wouldn't be as much racism, what they discovered was it wasn't much better. And so many of the African Americans got there and there weren't jobs, there wasn't money. But the African American churches more in the north began to do co-ops, they began to do banking in their church, they began to create jobs. All that happened way before the white church even talked about community development. So we have a lot to learn from them, because there's a community development mindset much more in the African American churches than there is and they didn't divide social action and evangelism, they did them together. So some things that we can learn there. I think I'll just stop here, because I don't know how much time I have, but let's just have can we do some questions, Bob? Is that all right with you?
Yes, let's open it up for questions. I'm going to tell you, this is fantastic what you've been sharing with us. So someone, if you just unmute your mic and ask your question, and Jimmy will respond to it.
Or I can ask for money.
There you go.
Brother Jimmy, could you tell us, if a church realizes they've been mostly working in relief, what are some easy steps that they can kind of move their ministries more towards development? Well,
the steps are easy, but they're long and hard. This is the problem with development. Relief feels good. I can give somebody food and I know they ate it and it satisfies me and it satisfies them. One of the challenges is that we love that quick fix. It's just built into our nature. But I'm raising teenagers to be adults. So hanging in there a long time. So I think one of the first thing is you've got to get a church to buy into a longer term mindset to say, how can we, if this is the neighborhood God gave us, how do we really love our neighborhood well? Or if this is what's happened in America is the rich have moved further away from the poor. The islands are so separated, and then we feel guilty and we think, let's go help poor people, but we have to have a little mission trip, go down and find a group that we can go help. But we still are living in, so it doesn't mean the whole churches have to live in the same neighborhood. What it means is there's got to be points of incarnation. You've got to have people who go live in the neighborhood and go maybe get an apartment complex downtown. But there's got to be an ongoing presence throughout the year. They can be representatives of the church. The church can fund that. It is church planning of a sort, but too quickly we let church planning happen naturally, because the Church of the Bridge thrived, not because we went down to start a church, because they owned it. And so I'd say the model needs to be, they need to understand the principles, and they need to start speaking that back to each other, because empowerment is not, they understand the word, it's easy to understand, it's awfully hard to do. And so I don't want to discourage them, because most times church staff, unless you're, maybe like Chelsea's doing with the DBA, or there are certain pastors within churches that are given the community development responsibility. So, you can go over to see Chris in South Dallas, but there needs to be some training on the front end. So unless if they're doing it, they should know it already. There's going to be some people that are already, but in most cases there needs to be training and then some next steps, and it's going to take time, and people have to. Here was the problem in the past in terms of expectations. Like somebody gives us money to go help somebody or to change something in the neighborhood, and they're going to give us 6 months, and then they want us to report what we've done. Maybe nothing's been done. It may take 6 months to figure out where God is leading in the neighborhood, or who are the leaders in that. We call them gatekeepers. Who are the ones in the community that must be a part of it? So you have to buy into a longer term mindset that doesn't produce early fruit nearly as much. When you grow a tree, it takes a few years. And so we have to recondition the mindset of our congregations to think differently and believe that the process is working. Good question.
Very good. Someone else, we got at least time for at least one more question, maybe two.
I do, Brother Bob. You spoke about the gentleman that went ahead and graduated from film school and is a director. Then you also spoke about some who fell through the crack and ended up in prison. How do you address the latter when they're released from prison? Do you have a program to kind of acclimate them back into society? I'm sure you just don't leave them as they are. So what do you do about those persons?
Okay, you asked one of the most challenging questions right now. There's about 3 or 4 things out there that I am still, not only with Mission Waco, we have a type of more relational type. We write all the, by the way, Church of the Bridge sends $25 a month to the prisoners inside the jail that come from our context. So we write them letters so that it's pre-release way before. We're doing that for years in advance. So we're building a relationship. And so they do come to us. And then I have a social worker. We have a place called the Meyer Center. They meet with the Meyer Center, and he sits down and helps evaluate, okay, what are the things you got to do? Just to get a driver's license today is not an easy thing. I mean, there are ministries that just, it may take, because of an out-of-state birth certificate, it may take 3 months to get a driver's license for them to even go to work. So, and some of them need, they want to go to work fast, and we help them do that as much as possible. We have a job training program. And we just, the main thing we do is we hold their hand as they get discouraged, because there's 10 people wanting that job as much as they do, and they now are an ex-offender and they don't have much chance. So what we try to do is buddy up to them, mentor them, love them, and keep them from getting discouraged and going back to the world that they came from. But there are a few places around that have really good homes and recovery centers. We do alcohol and drug rehab, and then we have a secondary system that people live together in. It's kind of a 3-quarter house where they pay rent, so the rent stays lower. But affordable housing is one of the biggest issues that we deal with, and so most of these folks, they go back to the home that wasn't necessarily a good healthy home. So living conditions. So the social worker in our ministry is tasked with helping them get in the best situation they can be. But it's not, we haven't gone far enough. We do not have one of those programs that I look at and think, man, we got this together, because we're still putting that together. But it is an issue, and it's going to get more, hopefully, if we can undo this mass incarceration stuff, we're going to start having more and more folks come. But the states are not giving we have to fight the church. And I know this is hard for churches, to go stand up, or to go to visit legislators. Our church wrote letters to legislators 3 weeks ago for the mental health issue, because if Texas is so low and the people are on the streets, who's going to fight for them? So churches, we're not really comfortable with that yet. I mean, some churches are, but most churches are afraid, well, let the legislators have. But systems are changed by people like you and me, and like people in our pews, who can put their name on a letter and say, we want this change, and we're voting next time based on that. But advocacy is not something that most Christians grew up doing. And so DBA, I don't know if y'all do that. I know CBF does. There's other nonprofit groups that have training to teach you how to do systemic change. But you have to pick out, what are the issues? What is your church? What is the 1 or 2 or 3 issues that your church is passionate about? Mass incarceration is one of those. By the way, there's some great stuff coming out right now. Have you seen the program 13th? New program. They give you the history of all this and how corrupted it had become, so that you have better education instead of thinking everything is, well, they deserve what they get. It's just unfair. And I'm not, people may not agree with me. The Black Lives Matter movement, to me, I preached on that 3 or 4 years ago to the white folks, because they don't understand it. We got to help our churches understand. This is not they're better than us mindset. It is just saying, see us. So the way we preach, the way we teach, is going to be a little, prophetic, and you're going to have some folks that are going to be a little uncomfortable and may not like what you say. It's going to take them time to change.
Thank you, Brother Larry. That was a great question. I think our time is gone. I tell you, Jimmy, this has been outstanding, and I just thank the Lord for you and what you're doing, and how you are helping us here in Dallas learn better to respond to these kind of needs.
And Larry, let me say this, Bob. We have a lot of groups come to Waco just for a day. walk you through the place. I mean, you can do a tour down here. We have a little thing called the Other Side of Waco tour. We teach people about understanding poverty, just what is SSI, what is all this stuff. People don't know those things. We think they do because they're educated, but they really don't understand that world. And in Waco, we drive them around to the places of real poverty. But you can come down here, and we have a cafe. It's closed down right now, but you come down here for 3 or 4 hours with a group of people and let me walk you around, and it will help give vision to some of the folks that they need to see some things.
Well, that'd be great. And Chelsea, we have the contact that we could give to our churches, how they could get in touch with Mission Waco and Jimmy.
Give them my email, because since I retired, use the jimmym.dorrell@gmail.com. I'm emeritus. I'm Mission Waco emeritus, but just use my personal jimmym.dorrell@gmail.
gmail.com. Well, Jimmy, we thank the Lord for you and just all that you're doing. And we want to pray for you before we go. And Chelsea, can I ask you, I tell you what, Jana, you said this is your last pastor's conference. So you're welcome anytime to link into us. But why don't you pray for Jimmy and the work he's doing? And we appreciate you and your leadership in Dallas Baptist Association.
Yeah.
You lead it, and then we'll be dismissed.
Okay. Dear Father, I do thank you so much for Jimmy and for Janet. And he doesn't even know the influence that he and his wife and his ministry has had on me personally for the last 25 years that I've been at DBA, but it has been a great influence. And Father, I just love hearing him talk and hear how you have still give him such a fire and passion for what he's doing. And I thank you for that, and for the way you've changed him, the way you've changed Waco, the way you have changed so many people through their ministry. Just thank you so much for that. And I pray continued blessings on Mission Waco, Mission World, on the Texas CCDN network, and just what you're going to continue to do through that. Thank you for giving Jimmy the opportunity to be with us today. Thank you for what he shared. And Father, help us as always to keep open eyes and open ears to what you want to show us, what you want to say to us. And Father, help us to be obedient and to follow that immediately. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Jimmy Dorrell. Thanks to the pastors and leaders for coming. Next week is Taylor Field, so look forward to seeing you at that as well. So,
blessings.
Everyone,
Thank you, Jimmy.
great to be with you.
Thank you all.
Okay.